Hello, my name is Ruby. If you are new to this channel, I am a professional tarot reader, psychic, archetypal astrologer, priestess of Mary Magdalene. And today on the channel, we are going to answer a viewer request. One of you asked me what my favorite decks are to work with the energy of Mary Magdalene. So I have 3 oracle decks and 4 tarot decks that I am going to be talking about today. If you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe. It helps our community grow. So before I begin, I want to say that card work is not the primary way in which I personally receive messages from deity. If I'm working with deity and I am looking for clarity or insight, what I usually do is I will do some type of devotional practice at my altar, and then I will sit or lay down in meditative space and do some type of inner journeying work. I find that that's how I get information the most clearly around my path. But I will use card work from time to time. And this is so individual for each person, how we receive messages from our guidance. So not all of these decks I've used extensively to work with Mary Magdalene, but all of them I feel carry a frequency that's resonant with her. In the oracle decks, I've used a lot more for this particular purpose than the tarot decks. So I'm going to start with oracle. I'll go through the oracle decks that I would recommend, and then I will go through the tarot decks that I would recommend, and then I will kind of give my recommendation, if you can only get one of each, what I think would be the best fit for this specific purpose, which is working with the energy of Mary Magdalene, channeling messages, and receiving guidance from her. So the first deck we're going to talk about is the Mystique of Magdalene. This is by Cheryl Yambrach Rose. Forgot the deck creator's name for a minute. She is the artist and the creator. I have done a full review of this deck on my channel if you are interested in hearing all of my thoughts. But I use this deck to channel collective messages from Mary Magdalene on my Instagram. And this deck also lives on my devotional altar space. And I will use this deck. Oh, I love this one. And I will use this deck to do a daily draw or just to receive some guidance from Mary Magdalene. So this deck really focuses on Mary Magdalene's time in France and Europe after Yeshua had left physical incarnation. There are depictions of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene together. That is my favorite thing about this deck. Those are my favorite cards in the deck. And I do feel that this deck is really connected to the frequency of the Magdalene. I don't use the guidebook with this deck. I don't particularly like the guidebook. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not how I have found my groove in working with this deck. So if you're not connecting with the guidebook, I would say feel free to skip it. I love this one. And this is more of a daily draw for me when I'm doing work with it by myself. But work with it in whatever way is most resonant for you. Okay, so the second oracle deck just came out, so I haven't had too much time to work with it. This is the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Meggan Watterson. Meggan Watterson wrote the book Mary Magdalene Revealed. I was really nervous about this deck because Meggan Watterson's first deck, the Divine Feminine Oracle, it took me a long time to find my groove with that deck. And it's not a typical oracle divination deck. I would also say that this is not a typical oracle or divination deck, but I find that working with the guidebook with this deck is a lot more seamless, and it's a lot more in that realm than her first deck. So this is the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Meggan Watterson, and this deck I encourage you to use the workbook with. I've really been enjoying the workbook. Like I said, I just got this deck, so I'm still figuring out how I work with its energy, but it's been just so accurate, such a blessing, such a tool for me on my journey. I feel like I've been getting some really profound insight from this deck. I don't think I'll ever use this deck to work with clients. I think this is going to be a deck that I use for myself, for my own inquiry work. But this deck is just full of a lot of deep spiritual teaching, wisdom, insight, just as the book of Mary Magdalene is full of deep spiritual wisdom and insight. And, you know, the book of Mary Magdalene's short and it's dense. We're talking about like an ancient Gnostic text. It's a lot to parse through. And so if you want to incorporate those wisdom teachings into your life, but you're not necessarily looking to be a biblical scholar, get this deck. Like, you're going to get the meat and the fruit of those teachings by working with this oracle. Love this one. It's very reminiscent of the Strength card, which I feel is one of Mary Magdalene's significators in the tarot. So that is the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Meggan Watterson. The third oracle I would recommend is the Rose Oracle by Rebecca Campbell. To me, this really carries the frequency of Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, and Isis. And if we're talking about Mary Magdalene, we're talking about the Rose lineage, which includes those other two energies as well. So if you feel connected to the Rose lineage and you feel connected to Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Isis, ancient Egypt, this is a good deck for you to work with. It's on the lighter side, the more love and light side, I'll say. But, you know, I really appreciate that it has more confronting cards, and I really appreciate how diverse this deck is. I feel there's different body types, there's different ethnicities in this deck, and so I really appreciate that. I feel like it was very intentional by the deck creator. A lot of the more new age leaning love and light decks can be very whitewashed. They can have an element of bypassing to them. I do not feel like that is the case with this deck. I've definitely received a lot from working with this deck, and I enjoy it. I wouldn't consider it one of my favorite oracles of all time, but I think if you are resonating with the teachings of the Rose lineage, with the teachings of Mary Magdalene, with the teaching of Isis, I don't think you'll regret adding this one to your collection. There's one more deck I don't have out with me, but I'm going to mention it anyways, and it's an oracle deck called Through the Eyes of the Soul. I have an unboxing for it on my channel. It is by the same deck creator as the Magdalene, Mystique of Magdalene. My light just changed again. It always does that when I start filming. So we had a little mood change, and whatever spirits are making that happen, like, go off, queen. So the one other deck I'll mention is Through the Eyes of the Soul by Cheryl Yambrach Rose. I would say that's a good oracle deck to use if you connect with Celtic mythology, Celtic shamanism, Avalon, and Mary Magdalene. I haven't included it on this list because I find it's much more in the Celtic paganism, Celtic shamanism, Avalon pathway than it is in the Mary Magdalene pathway, but there is a card depiction of Mary Magdalene in that deck, and I feel that it's a good deck for those that are on both paths or relate to both paths. So that's Through the Eyes of the Soul by Cheryl Yambrach Rose. Maybe get Mystique of Magdalene first, and if you really resonate with it, then like get the other deck by the same creator. So moving on to tarot now. And like I said, I have used, just moving something off my reading table, I have used the oracle decks to connect with Mary Magdalene specifically more than I've used these tarot decks, but tarot is a wonderful way to connect with the energy of the Magdalene. And so these decks would be good decks. They're good vibrational matches to the Magdalene essence, to the Magdalene energy, if you are wanting to use tarot specifically to deepen your connection to Mary Magdalene. So the first is the Alchemical Tarot by, I just brought this deck out. It's been sitting in my reading, like my card reading drawer where I leave my decks I'm not using for a while. This is the Alchemical Tarot by Robert M. Place. I got this deck because the Temperance card reminded me of Mary Magdalene. And this is a deck that's focused on alchemy. And Mary Magdalene is connected to the Knights Templar. She is connected to alchemy. She is connected to Tantra, which is all about inner alchemy, balancing our energies inside of us. So there's a real connection between the energy and the imagery in this deck and Mary Magdalene. This has a very like medieval feel to it. And I really want to find the Temperance card for you so that you can see where I'm coming from in recommending this for you. Oh, here we go, right here. So this Temperance card to me is Mary Magdalene. Like, this is a depiction of Mary Magdalene. You cannot convince me otherwise. And even though strength, I feel, is the main significator for Mary Magdalene in tarot, she is also Temperance and the Queen of Wands. And if you are looking to work with Mary Magdalene for balancing the inner masculine and feminine energy, if you connect to the practices of alchemy, if you connect to more medieval imagery and artwork, and you really like symbolism, and you like working with the elements, this would be a good one for you. So that's the Alchemical Tarot. The next deck is the She-Wolf Tarot by Devany Amber Wolfe. I love this deck. You know, the traditional colors for Mary Magdalene are red and green, but I experience her as pink, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so pink. So this definitely carries like the frequency of the Magdalene to me, just in like the backings. And there's a lot of Egyptian iconography here, and Mary Magdalene was a priestess of Isis, as we know. And this is a great deck to work with if you are specifically working with Mary Magdalene to heal wounding around sexuality, to deepen your connection to feminine embodiment. This is a very sexy deck. It's a very sensual deck. There's depictions of nudity. And so if you are looking to be more embodied in your feminine energy, if you are looking to explore those elements, those aspects of yourself with Mary Magdalene, this would be a good deck for you. And this is the She-Wolf Tarot by Devany Amber Wolfe. I have been told that the Serpent Fire Tarot would be another good deck to work with Mary Magdalene. Same deck creator. I don't own that deck though. I think I will eventually because I really have enjoyed the artwork that I've seen of it so far. It's been out for a while, so you might already own it. But I only have the She-Wolf Tarot, so that's what we're talking about today. So the third tarot deck that I would recommend is the Ritual Tarot by Tiera May. This is my favorite tarot deck of all time. It's tied with another deck that I'm going to show you in a minute. When I am using tarot to work with Mary Magdalene, I am using this deck and the next deck that I will show you. And this deck is a deck you could also use to work with Sekhmet, Hathor, Kali, Babylon. You could use this deck to work with any aspect of the divine feminine that I would consider to be a red goddess. And that's a goddess who is embodied in her darker feminine aspects. She's embodied in her sensuality, and she understands that sensuality is a way in which we alchemize ourselves. So goddesses that draw on our passion and our life force and encourage us to be embodied. You could also use this deck to work with Isis. So Isis, Hathor, Sekhmet. Bastet, Kali, Mary Magdalene. All of these goddesses share similar medicine, okay? They're sisters. So this is the Ritual Tarot by Tiera May. I believe this current edition is sold out. She is doing a Kickstarter for her titled version of this deck that I've been meaning to donate to. This video is probably going to give me the motivation to do that today. Because we love Tiera May. We want to support all of her decks. She is like a badass deck creator. And this deck is life-changing. So the last deck we're going to talk about is the Mary L. Tarot by Marie White. This deck is everything to me. This deck and the Ritual Tarot, bury me with them. Put them in my casket. Cremate me with them. They are an extension of myself. This deck I only use to read for myself. Every once in a while, a person will come into my life and I will use this deck to read for them. I think I have used this deck to read for 2 other people, and it was like a significant event when I did. This deck has female nudity, male nudity. It has really interesting artwork. It's not for everybody. Just sharing that before I share some of it with you. This 9 of Wands is my favorite 9 of Wands ever. And this deck, I truly believe, carries the energy of Christ consciousness, which is why I am including it in this list. To me, this deck is so deep. It's so esoteric. It's so multidimensional. This is a deck I work with the guidebook. So out of all of these tarot decks that I'm showing you, I read all of them completely intuitively, except for this deck. I am pulling the guidebook out because the guidebook is so deep, so intense, that I'm getting extra information. The guidebook is giving me such deep insight to not only just these cards, but to the tarot system as a whole. And I wouldn't say that this deck is Rider-Waite based. I wouldn't say it's Crowley based. This deck is its own animal. And she wants to go deep. She is relentless. She is beautiful. She is Sophia. She is the thunder perfect mind. That is this deck. And so I would not really use this deck for more mundane questions, because you're going to get really deep answers. So I wouldn't, necessarily use this deck for like some of the more mundane questions we bring to tarot, which is totally okay to bring to tarot, but I just don't think you're going to get what you are looking for if you use this deck for that. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend this deck to a tarot beginner unless the tarot beginner in question is really, really feeling drawn in and called to it, in which case it would be appropriate. Your soul is letting you know it's time to work with it. Get this deck when your soul tells you to. It's like similar to plant medicine. Like, don't do it unless it feels inside like, yes, this is exactly what is necessary right now. And again, this is the Mary L. Tarot by Marie White. This deck is a game changer for me. Sometimes she leaves me more confounded than when I consulted her. But I think all the 6s are archangels. All the 10s are horsemen of the apocalypse. Like, this deck is incredible. And so, I would use this deck for working with Mary Magdalene if you are really on a path of Christ consciousness and you are really serious about evolution of consciousness. You are really serious about confronting your shadow. The 10 of Cups, look at this. She's amazing. And a lot of the cards that we associate as happy cards in tarot, like the 10 of Cups, this is what we get. We get Santa Muerta. And then some of the cards in tarot that we associate as being really difficult, in this deck, it's a whole other story. This is Temperance. So that's all I'll share about this deck today. We could talk about the Marielle Tarot for hours and hours and hours, but I'll spare you. So I gave you 3 Oracle decks and an alternate. I gave you 4 tarot decks that you could use. I hope I gave you some insight on what deck would be most appropriate based on what avenue you're looking to work with the Magdalene with. And, I think I'll say just before I end this video, these are just the decks from my own personal collection. I have, been collecting tarot decks over the years, but by no means do I have the most extensive, grand tarot collection. So, there's definitely decks out there that you can also use for this purpose. I just don't have them, so I can't speak to them. If there's a deck not on this list that you use to work with the Magdalene and you really feel it's resonant with her energy, please leave a comment. Please let me know. I probably want this deck in my collection. I'm curious what decks you are using to work with the Magdalene as well. This is not the end-all, be-all, exhaustive list. This is just what I would personally recommend based on what is living and alive in my personal tarot collection, my personal tarot and oracle library at this moment. So I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much to the viewer who requested this video. I am so happy to make videos about topics that you're interested in. So don't be afraid to reach out and let me know what videos you are looking to see from this channel. And as always, I am sending you love and I'm wishing you well.